Hey, Garland Nixon here, and it's a Monday morning, and let's talk about strategic patience. Let's talk. Hi, Garland Nixon. Ooh, my volume's a little high. Garland here, and let's talk about the issue. I think with me is strategic patience, and here's what I mean. Over the course of, I'll always go back to there was a famous fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, whoever it was, right? And I think it was Foreman, but the bottom line was he faced a very large and powerful opponent. And he recognized that just to go head to head with the opponent, face to face, muscle to muscle, was not his best option. Muhammad Ali was good enough that he may have even won that. He was athletic enough, quick enough. He had all of the tools necessary, but he knew that to go toe to toe with a more physically able, powerful opponent would play into the hands of the opponent. So he elected instead to do what he called the rope-a-dope, wherein he got on the ropes, he moved around a lot, and he got his opponent to throw punches and just throw punches until the opponent was tired. And when the opponent was tired, he took advantage of that and finished his opponent off, right? He's a big, strong guy, but those muscles create a lot of lactic acid, right? And the more they throw, kind of like an alligator, they're big and powerful, and they can surge and make a big a powerful move, and you're done for. They can run real fast for short bursts, but they have so many muscles, they create a lot of lactic acid, and so they can only make their big move. That's why, what does an alligator do? How does he attack? He's very patient. He sits and waits. He never attacks until he has the initiative, right? And he sits and waits and waits and waits and waits because he knows when he makes his move, he doesn't want to burn out. He knows what his advantage is. So that's an example of the bigger, more powerful opponent utilizing his strength, right? The bigger, more powerful opponent exercises strategic patience. The alligator waits. He knows he has the power, but he knows that if he uses it, if he uses it too much too frequently, he'll be worn out and he won't get to eat the deer or whatever it is he wants to eat. He ain't getting it, right? He lies and wait for the perfect opportunity, not a good opportunity, the perfect opportunity. And when that perfect opportunity, boom, boom, he uses his muscles, creates a lot of lactic acid, but he clamps down on the victim, the hapless victim. And you know what happens to the hapless victim? He becomes dinner, right? So the point I make is this: if your opponent has the advantage, Muhammad Ali has your opponent has the bigger muscles, you wear him down. You exercise strategic patience until that your opponent is tired and you can easily finish him off. There's been instances where a person has fought until they were so tired they just collapsed. I mean, you walk over and you just touch them in the chest and they fall because they've worn themselves out. That's the smaller, quicker opponent exercising strategic patience. The alligator is the opposite. That's the bigger, stronger, powerful, right? But he knows if he utilizes his strength and power, just any time he sees a chance to grab a meal, that he's more often than not he's not going to have any success. And he's going to wear himself out. So instead, the big, powerful alligator just sits, and he may sit for a day, he may sit for a week, because he knows when the opportunity comes, he's going to be able to take advantage of it. Okay. So why do I say that? All of that to get back to this, the empire's cannon fodder, weapons and options run low. Because I believe, and I talk to so many of my friends, right? And people who are watching this, people who are anti-imperialist, people who look at this and they say, hey, the US started this, that like me hate the neocons and understand the danger of the neocons, right? Excuse me. my wallet here has gotten too thick. Anybody ever have their wallet, you have your wallet get too thick and you sit on your wallet and you're like, holy crap, it feels like I'm sitting on a rock. I better empty my wallet out. So it's getting a little too much crap in it. Anyway, so I move it to my front pocket. So I know so many people that are like, look, what's wrong with Putin? What's wrong with the Russians? They're going to have to act. They're going to have to jump. They're going to have to pounce. And we've been hearing this for month after month, right after the war started, right after the special military operation started, people finish them off, get this thing done. You better hurry up. And it seems to me that the Russian military leadership and political leadership is exercising a form of strategic patience. Now, is it the alligator who says, my muscles build a lot of lactic acid, therefore I can only pounce on my enemy when I'm kind of pretty sure I'm going to get them? That way I don't waste all of that energy, because I'm big and strong, but I don't have I can't be running around. I can't go jog the 13K or the 26K by any stretch of the imagination, but from 13 to 26 feet, I can grab this deer and eat it, right? Is it that? Or is it the Muhammad Ali punch, 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 and to, cause your enemy to punch himself out? I would argue it's there are some elements of both. But for months, and even now, I hear a lot of friends, and I understand that, because what they're saying now, there's two ways that people put it. At some point, some people say, at some point, the Russian army is going to have to knock the Ukrainians down, right? At some point, they're going to have to get a obvious victory. The other part of it is they should do it now, but they need to utilize their power. They need to utilize their superior military force to end this thing, right? When the truth of the matter is this, let's say that, let me throw this in there. We're not sure what ending this thing looks like. So again, strategic patience, I would argue this. Rather than end this thing, what if we put it the different way? You let this thing find its end, right? You let this find its way to an end. And then when it is clear and obvious that you need to pounce, for instance, what did Ali do? Ali would wait until, the guy punch, and then at some point the guy can barely get his arms up. Well, at this point, it's easy. You walk over there, you touch him with a feather, he drops. Or the alligator, he's laying there, or crocodile, and there's a deer, and he's looking. He's looking, and the crocodile's just moseying slowly closer and closer and closer. And at some point, he realizes the deer thinks the coast is clear. The wildebeest, whatever it is, he thinks the coast is clear, and he just stops looking around and starts drinking his water. It's like, oh man, this water, it sure is good. It's a hot day. I looked around, I don't see any crocodiles. Everything's good. The coast is clear. And the crocodile's like, obviously he doesn't see me, so time to make my move. And he waits. Now, that he may have done that to 10 wildebeest, and every time when he got close enough to pounce, they looked around and took off. And he didn't bother to chase after him. Why are you going to chase a wildebeest? You're an alligator. There'll be more wildebeest, right? Lays and lays and lays. And when he finally gets there, it now becomes obvious to the crocodile that the wildebeest ain't looking. And we know how that works out. It's wildebeest stew time. He grabs the wildebeest and nature takes its course, right? So there are those who would argue that you have to force it. You have the very Zen kind of thing going on here, right? There are those who would argue you need to force this thing to an end. You need to come in and punch your enemy out, knock Ukraine down, and be done with them. There are those who argue you need to just wear them down or whatever. But what if you continue what you're doing, right? You continue your assaults. You continue to pick strategic high value targets and attack them. If you have the ability to keep fighting, you keep fighting and allow this thing to find its end. And if you want to argue the Russians should end it in the same way that when Ali was fighting Foreman or Norton or whoever it is, once he could see that the guy couldn't raise his arms, he went over and knocked him out. It wasn't hard at that point. The guy can't fight back, right? Or the alligator, once he sees that the old wildebeest ain't looking anymore, he meanders over and grabs him by the hindquarters and eats him. Because it now becomes obvious. I would argue at some point, there will become a point where it becomes obvious. Strategic patience is, in fact, a a military technique, right? There's sure you've got all kinds of military techniques, so techniques of surrounding people, of different kinds of assaults, different types of. Do you sit and wait? Do you wedge movements and pincer movements? There are all kinds of military movements on the battlefield, physical movements, right? Behind those physical movements, there's strategy. Wars are won with strategies, not tactics, right? If you're going to if you get in a fight with someone, right? Do you win that when you get in and the person assaults you, or maybe you took a self-defense courses? So when the person attacks you, you already have your strategy. If they attack you, you know how to block, punch, kick, knee, elbow, bite, whatever you got to do. Maybe you have learned certain things to scream, yell, make noise that brings people around, different things like that, right? You have a strategy if you're attacked. If somebody attacks you, if you're walking down the street and some person decides they just want to beat you up, it's too late. It's too late. If they know how to fight and you don't, if they're bigger and stronger, you don't have you're done. But if you have already prepared, you have a strategy. If you're attacked, if they attack you from the back, you do this. Some guy runs up in the back, man, and you catch him with that. Look at that. That elbow goes back. Wow, he runs right in it. Bam, right into the elbow, right? You already know. This guy grabs you. There's another guy behind you. You already know if there's an attacker from behind, you can elbow him. You can go down with a hammer punch to the groin. You can do all kinds of things, right? There's two people. If there's two people, and you don't have a strategy, you don't have anything, and you're just relying on tactics, then if somebody grabs your neck, what do? You instinctively grab that hand and try to pull it off you, but you can't because they've got you in a headlock, right? You don't realize you can slap the groin. There's other things you can do. You can get a finger and twist it. You can do all kinds of things, but you don't have a strategy. You only have tactics. You're going to lose. A strategy, in my opinion, is strategic patience. You wear your opponent down. As Andrei Martyanov says, you exhaust your opponent, right? And by the time, and I've been arguing for this all along, that by the time you punch your opponent, he's worn out. Now, there are a number of things going on right now that to me supports my argument for strategic patience. Number one, there's been a number of articles that the U.S. empire, NATO, whatever you want to call it, is looking for mercenaries. Why is that? Because they're running out of cannon fodder. There's only but so many Ukrainians. Sadly, pathetically, the United States is throwing Ukrainians into literally taking people, giving them a couple weeks training, putting them in a Bradley or something and saying, go into that minefield. Now think about this. If you only have a couple weeks of training of self-defense, couple weeks, somebody says, hey, Garland, you're going to get jumped by 3 people. Okay, 2 people, whatever. 2 people. One guy's going to attack you from the front, one from the back, right? The guy from the front's going to get your attention. The guy from the back's going to try to come up and grab you in a headlock around the throat and choke you, right? So we're going to give you 2 weeks of training. Well, I mean, that would help, but not all that great. And oh, by the way, both of them are going to be 6'6", 280 pounds of solid muscle. Well, life ain't going to be good, right? I got 2 weeks of training and I'm going in there. I'm probably going to be dead. But what if you have long-term training, the training to the point where you know how to read people around you and you're like, there's something funny about this guy. He's up to something. And then this person's coming at you and you're like, this guy means business, and you turn around and put your back to a wall, right? Or you look for an escape route and you're out of there, right? You put your back to a wall, now they can't jump you from behind. You look for an escape route, you get out of there. Some guy's talking a lot of mouth, calling your names, and it could, if you weren't strategically prepared, you might get angry. How dare you say that to me, right? Meanwhile, the other guy's creeping up behind you. This guy's making noise, calling names. You realize he's trying to pick a fight. I'm out of here. You're smart enough. You have your strategy. You've been trained well enough to understand that the way to win a fight is not the fight, that the fight you win is the one that you don't get in. So you see a fight coming, you get the hell out of there. That's the strategy. You put your back against the wall. Now the guy can't come up and attack and from behind. That's a strategy. You won that fight using strategy. You got away alive. You won the fight. You used a strategy. Right? You made a lot of noise. My self-defense instructor would say, do things like act like you're crazy. You could just start talking to yourself on the street and acting like you're mentally ill. And the guy's like, what the hell do I fight this guy? He's out of his mind, right? All types of, these are strategies, right? And the idea that you just got to go punch the Ukrainians out, that you just got to go at them and doggone it, there's the Ukrainians, there's us, let's go punch them out. If you'd have done that 2 months, 3 months, 4 months into the war, they were at their strongest, wouldn't they? They were at the U.S. military. They still had lots of weapons. They still had lots of their stuff. What did the Russians do with strategic patience? They pick. Every day they took away more armor. Every day they depleted their their air defense systems. At one point, they were sending in missiles and all kinds of stuff. And I suspect, based on how they're doing this thing over the long run, that Alexander McCourse, a lot of people talked about it. What they did was they caused them to fire off all of their anti-aircraft missiles, all of their air defense missiles, to expose the locations of their air defense systems so they could take them out. They just picked away at them. They body punched them. They rope-a-doped them. They made them shoot. They made them fire, right? Meanwhile, they continued to strike at the masses of troops, So it was a patient thing that strategically, I'm going to deplete your air defense system. I'm going to deplete your I'm going to find out where you're transporting things, and I'm going to deplete your warehouses and your ability to transport things. I'm going to pick away at you and weaken you to a point that when I finally do make my move, it'll be easy. That's one of the reasons I use the word collapse. I've been using that word all along. Ideally, you want to wear your enemy down to the point where you just walk up, as they say, and touch them with a feather. Doink. Oh, and they collapse, right? You want to defeat your opponent to the point where you don't have to use brute strength and muscle and power and get close enough that they could cut you with an edged weapon. No, you want to wear them down to the point where you walk up and touch them with a feather right on the forehead, boink, and they just go, and collapse, right? And I think that the strategic patience perspective is what's going on. And I understand people get anxious, and I understand people are like, this is a very dangerous thing. And I think the Russians need to end it, blah, blah, blah. My opinion, my argument has always been strategic patience. Take your time, because if you're, in order to have a strategy that's multi-pronged, you must be patient. Some guy assaults me, right? Some people are going to assault me on the street. Well, one of them could be to flee. Now, keep in mind, my thought could be, I want to flee, right? But the guy's too close to me. I can't run. So I need a multi-pronged strategy, right? I need to do more than this guy's coming up on me. There's another guy coming up. I want to get away. What am I going to do? Well, I can't just walk away because they're going to attack me if I try to walk away, right? So I may have a multi-pronged strategy. Number one, I make a lot of noise. I yell and scream, blow a whistle, anything I can that makes a lot of noise. People turn around and look, and now these guys don't want to jump me in the street because there's too many witnesses, right? No, that's one. Number two, I could strike one blow, enough to stun him. You know what I mean? A guy comes to me, and man, I strike the one guy with just a plain old front kick to the groin. I just walk up and I see this guy whap, and this guy doubles that in pain because I struck him in the groin. The guy behind me, I turn around, he's coming up on me, maybe kick him in the kneecap. Maybe, that you want to use one of your longer weapons against this guy because you don't want to get him close up enough to grab you or knife you or something, right? Your longest weapon being your leg. This guy's coming up behind you. You turn around, kick right to the kneecap. He runs right into that. Now, you've struck this guy in the groin. You've kicked this guy in the leg. The two people are going to assault you. Now, what is your next strategy? You could yell, or see, a lot of people wonder what's this yelling about when somebody attacks you, right? That's attacking. That's a multi-pronged strategy. That's bringing in people, alerting people that that's a problem, right? So you yell, you strike, okay, and you run. That's a multi-pronged strategy. I'm going to yell. It's going to make noise for people. I'm going to strike my opponents, not going to kill them, but it's going to stun them. Then I'm going to flee. Boom, boom, boom. I've executed a multi-pronged strategy, and I fled, and these two guys don't get to grab me and choke me to death or kill me or whatever their plan was, right? In the same way, a multi-pronged strategy of strategic patience on the battlefield, where I continue to inflict damage on my enemy. I continue to cripple my enemy and to weaken my enemy so that when and if I have to make a massive attack, my enemy is weaker and less able to defend himself. Meanwhile, Part of that is I continue to drill, if I'm Russia, with China, to do military drills with China, to work with China militarily. That right now the Russians and the Chinese are doing naval drills. That sends a message to, you know what that's like? That's like this. You ever see in the animal kingdom where a bird or something will feel threatened and it puffs itself up to make itself look bigger, sending a message to its enemy, hey, I'm big and strong, don't mess with me, right? That's doing the same thing. Russia and China, they're doing Navy drills today, right now. They've been doing them for the week, unless they've ended. They may have ended, but they've been doing them for like a week or so. Bottom line, what is that? That's to send a message to the U.S. empire. Hey, man, we're big and strong. You might want to fight one. You might want to fight the other. Do you really want to fight both? Right. Meanwhile, what are they doing? They're doing Russia is working with Iran and Syria to try to run the U.S. the hell out of Syria. So they're putting pressure in Syria diplomatically. The Kremlin, Putin just made a big statement about Africa, and they're going to have a summit with Africa. So they're trying to broaden their diplomatic circle of power with Africa, the Middle East. So it's a multi-pronged strategy. It is so you don't have to be in a rush. If the strategy in if Russia's strategy in Ukraine was simply militarily, yeah, they've got the military power to go in and really knock out Ukraine. But a couple of things. If they'd have done it early, Ukraine would have still had all their S-300s and air defense systems. If they'd have done it what a lot of people wanted, they'd have lost a lot of aircraft. They'd have lost a lot of people. They'd have took a pretty nasty hit. And who wants to take that nasty hit? Because then they'd have to deal with at home people seeing all the body bags come in. They'd have to deal with what happens if NATO attacks us now and we've been weakened. Remember, U.S. empire wanted to weaken Russia. If they had launched a massive attack into the teeth of the Ukrainian defense, they'd have been weaker because they would have won, yes, but they would have taken some massive losses and had to use a lot of firepower. So what did they do? They flipped the script. Through strategic patience, instead of early in the war, the Russians launching a massive military attack into the teeth of remember Bakhmut, right? They were dug in Bakhmut. They're dug in all over the place. Instead of the Russians saying we're going to launch an assault on Bakhmut, where they're in some of these other places where the Ukrainians are dug in, they took their time. They plinked away at them. They fought. Yes, they lost men, but it wasn't a massive big arrow, as they say, offensive into the teeth of the Ukrainian defense. They didn't do that. They sat back, they bombed them, they artilleried them, they did all of the things to weaken them until they could finally take Bakhmut, right? So they didn't go into the teeth of the Ukrainian defense. However, now what's happened? Out of desperation, the U.S. empire now has their Ukrainian cannon fodder, because of strategic patience, going into the teeth of the Russian defense. If they'd have acted when a lot of people wanted them to act, come on, you got to go punch them down, they'd have driven into the teeth of the Ukrainian defense. Exercising strategic patience now, the Ukrainians are now going into the teeth of the Russian defense. And as I said, was talked about earlier, although I got a little sidetracked, the Ukrainians are not properly trained. That's got to be part of your strategy, right? They don't have a very good strategy. They're taking guys off the streets, giving them a couple weeks, maybe a couple months of training. It still ain't enough, in unfamiliar vehicles, putting them in these vehicles and saying, "Go forward, young man." And then there's minefields. And now where are they going forward? Right into the teeth of the defense. You know, I used to like to play basketball, right? I played in high school and community college and leagues. That was my exercise. I loved it. I used to play in like 3 leagues, you know, county leagues, city leagues in Baltimore, stuff like that. And what do you know if you play basketball? The other team's playing a zone. You don't drive into the zone. You got to pass around. You got to use your, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. You play team basketball, pass the ball around, find an open spot, take advantage of a shot or whatever, right? Okay. But you don't drive. There's a bunch of guys clumped together. And what do they want you to do? They want you to take the ball and dribble right into that zone, into all of those people and into that crowd. They're going to take the ball. You're going to lose. Right. So the worst possible thing you could do in sports is drive into a crowd. Football. American football. You want to run the football. What do you want to do? You want to spread people out. You want to fake them. You want to make them think you're going to pass, and then you hand off to the running back, and he has an open area to run. The last thing you want to do is hand it to the guy, and there's a crowd on the other side, and he runs right into the crowd. He gets pushed backwards. The idea is always to deceive your opponent and to find an open spot to move, to act. Okay, and to be ready and properly trained. And so what the Russians, I think, have done is a good idea, a good job of taking their time, of using deception, of using strategic patience and picking away. Hey, they've got an air defense system. Let's patiently pick away at their air defense system. We'll bait them to shoot at everything that we can bait them to shoot at, which will expose the locations. We'll send missiles in and blow them up. And we got days, we got weeks, we got months, we got time. We ain't got to move. Right. And slowly but surely, we'll throw an artillery till we'll take this town, artillery till we'll take that town. If it gets like, if we see too many of them coming and we think we may lose a town, we back up. We back up. Remember, again, self-defense. Right. If some guy attacks you, there are people that'll stand in one spot. You don't protect that spot. You're protecting your body, not that spot. Be ready to move. The guy comes at you, you move over here, you move over there, you pivot, you duck, you dodge, you run. You run if you can. Get the hell out of there. Anything you can. You're not protecting a spot. In self-defense, you're protecting your body. Don't let somebody pin you in one spot and you just stand there and you just turn and you defend that spot. You move. If you see a guy with his hands like that, what do you know? He wants to set you up with this one and hit you with the big baby, with that big haymaker, right? You keep moving to the left. You keep moving away from that. You keep moving in that direction so that he can punch you with this. But that haymaker's never going to catch you because you're constantly moving and he's got to continue to readjust. So because he wants to get you, you stay away from his big punch. Stay away from it. You move. What do the Russians do? They're in a town, a burg, a group home of homes. The Ukrainians start coming in like mad. What do the Russians often do? They vacate it. See ya. Ha, ha, ha. We ran the Russians out of Liman, whatever the hell, right? They leave Liman, you come in, and they shell you while you're there because they've already got it gridded and set up for artillery. So they just leave. They're like, okay. And you're like, hey, we took that spot. And the Russians are like, we weren't protecting that spot. We were protecting our bodies. We were protecting our soldiers. Now we'll leave that spot. Now you can have that spot if you want it, but it ain't going to be, it's not going to be a wonderful thing to keep it because we've already got the grid set up. And when we see where you are, we're going to hit you with artillery. And then eventually you're going to leave the spot and we'll walk right back in it. You're not protecting a spot. So what the Russians have done again, but that's strategic patience. Why is that? Because you have now inflicted some damage on your enemy. They came in and thought they were winning. They didn't. And then you came back and hit them and then they left and you got that again. And you say to them, if you want to come and take this town again, come on, it's yours. We'll leave the town again and you can hit that town and then we'll run you back out of it. We don't care. We're inflicting pain and punishment and damage on your military, not holding a particular ground. Because in the end, if we win, we get all the ground. The winner gets it all. So in the short term, we could hold a town here or hold a town there, or we could say in the end, the person who wins gets it all. So why bother with screwing around over one little bit now? So that being said, because of the strategic patience, because of all of this crap that I've talked, they've plinked away at their air defense system. They've hit foreign mercenary bases. They've attacked their points of where they hold their weaponry and ammunition depots and things like that, because they've strategically and patiently plinked away at those things and said to the West, you keep refilling. We're going to blow this stuff to heck and you just keep refilling because at some point you run out. And that's what we're waiting for. And so I think that what they've been doing is just taking their time. And I'm not saying that they're not going to launch the big air offensive tomorrow. I'm not saying they ain't going to launch it next week, the week after. For all I know, the Russians could very well say, look, you'll get tired before we will. We ain't in no rush. They could look at this thing and say, look, we're patient. We got another year. We got another 2 years. We don't know what their timeline is. We got another 5 years. We got another 10 years. The Russians could have set this up. Here's an option. And would it be a bad option for the Russians? And now I'm not saying that they are, but would this be a stupid option for the Russians? Or would it be a reasonable strategy? What if the Russians said, look, 10 years. That's what we're going to set up for. We're going to get our military industrial complex going. We're going to figure out about how much we need, how many men, this, that, and we're going to set ourselves up for 10 years because we don't think they can do half of that. We don't think they can do a quarter of that. So we're going to set for 10 years. That way, we can keep swinging for 10 years. We're very, very patient. And if they can, and the way we see it, they don't have enough people. They're running, and now here's the bottom line. Right now, the Ukrainians are they're running out of the Ukrainians between three things: between the Ukrainian men and soldiers, running short, a lot of injuries. Between an add-on Ukrainian military equipment, that's pretty much wiped out. It's all being replaced by NATO. And Ukrainian morale. How long can you keep fighting if you're losing? Right? I get in a fight with somebody and I'm fighting some guy and he punches me and my eyes swelled up, my nose swells up, my ears, cauliflowered ears, right? I got injuries, I got scratches, I got bites. At some point, no mas, right? At some point, I got to say, I've taken I can't keep doing this. I start to wear down and realize I ain't going to win. I'm never going to win. What am I doing here? Why am I fighting? Maybe I need to walk away. Maybe I need to deal with this guy, right? So I think that, from the perspective of the Russians, if they patiently continue to punch away and execute their diplomatic moves in Africa, the Middle East, execute their military maneuvers in that, continue to expand their alliance with China, continue to practice fighting with China, continue to share military technology with China, etc., right? And here's the other part. The U.S. Economy is not in the best condition. So somewhere, what happens if they say, well, we're going to set out a 5 or 10 year plan where we're going to just kind of dig in. We're going to punch the hell out of the Ukrainians and whoever they send out on there. We're going to, whenever we see an opportunity, we're going to launch some assertive maneuvers on whoever's there. And because at some point, over the course of the next 5 years, the U.S. economy is going to crap out like it always does. It's on the edge. They're going to get another 2008 because every 10 years or so they get one, and they're due. And things are going to go bad for them. And when they do, that's going to make it harder. And how long can Europe hold on? Europe's got economic problems. Last year, the Europeans were saved by an exceptionally warm winter, so they didn't run out of gas. What happens if this winter is not that warm and they run out of gas? And what if the Russians say, well, this winter may not be warm, but we're going to say that within the next 5 winters, you're going to have a really, really cold winter within the next 5. And somewhere in that, your crap's going to fall apart. Then what are you going to do? How are you're going to need our gas. You're going to need our assistance. So my point being, if you just look at it from what's going on right now, okay, if you look at it long term, add this. Add one other thing you got to add, the political perspective. If I'm Russia, I can play you out. You know why? Because my current president, the current president of Russia, has a very, I'm not good, I don't, 80%, between 80 and 90% approval of the conflict. That doesn't mean that all of the parties love Vladimir Putin and support him perfectly as an individual. He does have high approval ratings. They were in the 60s before, 64%. But there's, you got the Communist Party, you got other parties just like here. That doesn't mean that every single Russian supports Putin and his political party and everything about him politically, but that means that they do support the special military operation. And the only thing that angers them, I'll put it like this: Putin's problem for long-term strategy has nothing to do with the West. It has to do with internally the people being anxious, saying we want to move further and we want to finish this thing off. But I think if they weigh that right and they say, look, here are the two possibilities. Number one, we sit here, we continue to punch away, but we don't make the big arrow offensive. And the people in Russia will be upset and say, why won't you finish them off? However, weigh that against the other side. If they say, let's do the big arrow offensive and we lose 25,000, 50,000 men, to attack dug in positions, you're going to lose big. Even if they lose 250,000 or 200,000 for Ukrainians, but we lose 50,000. Will the people of Russia be more angry at the fact that this thing's dragging out, or will they be more angry at a major loss and a major bunch of body bags coming home? So I think that if you are the Russian government, you have to look at those two things and weigh those things in. You also see all the other factors going on, all the chess game, the grain deals, and all this other stuff going on. And you see the United States, whereas it's not just punching itself out in Russia. It also, the Biden administration and the insane neocons are caught in a tangle with China, where they're threatening China, and they're, yeah, there's the Taiwan and blah, 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 right? Middle East, the U.S. is sending fighters and planes and stuff to the Middle East, supposedly to confront Iran or whatever. And because Russia and Iran and Syria and these other parties are doing everything they can to run the United States out of the Middle East, so they're putting pressure. And I also think that's part of the strategy. You put pressure on them in the Middle East. Wouldn't surprise me to see China put more pressure on them, because this is a unified act. Russia is not in this by itself. They're not in this fight by itself, because there are a lot of other people that know if the U.S. was able to defeat Russia, then they'd all be on the lunch menu, and so they're going to do everything they can to help Russia, right? So the strategic patience that is being practiced by Russia has caused the Ukrainians to run low of people, to look for more mercenaries, to do everything they can, because it's tough to fight a war without people, and it's going to be tough to fight a war with people as the losses become obvious, as it becomes the futility of assaulting Russian minefields with poorly trained people in Bradleys becomes more obvious. It's going to be harder to maintain the morale that you need to fight, the fighting spirit, right? Weapons. Russia has really cranked up its military industrial complex. And so based on what it needs, right, for this fight, it's determined these are the priorities. This is what we need for the fights. They're producing a lot of drones. They're producing a lot of rounds and shells, because they're an artillery-based war. It's an artillery-based war for the Russians. So they are on the upswing as far as their military industrial complex for this reason. They have a lot of natural resources. They have the steel and the things that they need to make artillery. Artillery, you need steel, right? They also, tanks, all that, you need steel. They have the steel, they make the steel. So they have the things that they need to do it. They have the people. They have the trained workforce. One thing, if you know about, if you around a lot of Russians, if you're around a lot of people who have maybe been in the Soviet Union, grew up in the Soviet Union, one thing you know about it, the people were well educated. Everybody was well educated. You have a very well educated workforce. So they've got an educated workforce, so they can keep going. Their military industrial complex was ready to go. It was always, Russia's been attacked so many times that they were always, their military industrial complex was always in the starting blocks, waiting for the starting gun to be fired, right? Waiting for the blank gun to pop off. Boom, blank gun pops off, they're making stuff. So they are ready to go. And they've got their military industrial complex roaring, which means they can continue this fight. Meanwhile, the U.S. empire is having to reawaken it, and still it's going to take 5 years before it gets to where it needs to be. Can the Ukrainians continue to fight for 5 years? Running out of people and running out of weapons. And politically speaking, add this, Joe Biden has the United States, because I don't think Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. The United States has elections coming up, and a lot of countries in Europe has elections coming up. What if the Russians say we're going to exercise strategic patience through, and they look and they say, England, Germany, France, this country, that country, all of these countries have elections. We're going to maintain course and speed through the elections of the next 4 or 5 countries, because that's going to make a difference. And how much pressure is it going to be on the ruling parties and ruling coalitions in these countries if people are unhappy and there's opposition parties standing up saying, we're going to get out of this. We elect us, we get you out of this. Again, if the Russians are patient and in no rush, I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but I'm saying in the event that they do that, there are a lot of things that could work into their favor politically. If they're just thinking of next day or next week or next month, okay. But if they're looking at this, a 5 or 10 year plan for this war, and legitimately, when you talk about patience, they've been in Syria since 2015, something like that. That's 8 years. A lot of these military conflicts take a long time. So if they look at this from the perspective of time and just say, we ain't in no rush, you've got political changes going on again, their adversaries. You've got a difficulty producing weapons. You've got them running out of cannon fodder, Ukrainians. And of course, you've got the grain deal. You've got all of these other things that people need, food that comes out of that region, fertilizers that comes out of that region. So in my opinion, I'm not going to say that's what they're doing, strategic patience. But I'm saying it is obvious that that is at least a part of the Russian strategy, overall strategy, is strategic patience, that not to be in a rush. And let me add this, if you think about this, if you're going to, for instance, if you're going to launch a major assault against the Ukrainians, here's the other reality about it. Don't you have to take out their air defense system first? So for people who wanted it to happen 6 months ago, guess what? Didn't the Russians have to take however many months it took to wear down, to locate, to destroy, to coax the Ukrainians into using up their missiles, things of that nature? So even that kind of patience was required, even if they want to make a big offensive. And I might add, if they got other plans, they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, Joe Biden has said that they're running short of munitions, right? We're going to make them fire everything they got. And then what we're going to, bottom line is this. It is quite possible. And if I were in charge, this would be my move. Not saying I ain't in charge of nothing. But if I were in charge, my move would be, I will wear my opponent down. I'll make him swing, shoot till he's out of ammunition. I'll make him argue until he's out of political resolve. I'll make him charge in a machine gun nest until he's out of people. I'll make him politically stand up to the Russians all over the West until the political environment becomes toxic and the opposition parties start to scream, we want out of this. I'll make him continue to stand up to me until the winters get so cold that he's running short of fuel to keep his homes warm. Right? I'm going to do all of that. If I'm the Russians, that's what I'm thinking. I ain't in no rush. So for those, look, and I say this, tomorrow morning, I could wake up and they could say the Russians' big counteroffensive has started, because it's possible that they have a goal. We want to deteriorate X amount of their air defense systems and this and that. And once we get to that point, then we're ready to attack. It's possible that's wrong. But I'm just saying that I'm not in the camp of people who say they need to act, they need to punch right away, they need to finish this, they need to end this thing. I'm in the camp of people that says strategic patience. Beware the fury of a patient man. You attack me, right? I may not want to punch right away. I may not want to attack right away. I may want to stop and think. Right. I want to have the freedom to act as I want, as I want. So if you're threatening me, oh, Garland, I'll kick your ass. I'll punch you. I'll beat you up. Some people scream, I'll kill you. And they just start flailing away, throwing punches. Or somebody might back up. Yeah, I'm going to kick your ass. You're just a jerk. They may back up and look around. Does it look like this guy has somebody else? Look at him. Does it look like he has a weapon? Can I see everything here? Now, this guy's going, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to beat you. I take my time and look. Where are the exits? Can I get out? I'm looking at all options and everything and all possibilities, right? I'm in no rush. So to me, some people are saying, finish them off, attack them now, beat them up and punch them. And I'm saying, oh, no rush, brothers, no rush. Never be in a rush. Back up, take your time. If your opponent will give you that time, you take it. You take the time. If your opponent is not swinging yet, you back away. You get your back against the wall. You look for whatever you can do. Think of, is there something that I can use for a weapon? Well, look at that. There's a pool cue standing there. I can use that to put between me and my opponent, and he can't get any closer to the cue, me to the pool cue, or I can poke it with him. That's an option. I'm just saying, you're looking around for any and everything you can, and you're in no rush. Time is on your side, right? I've said it all along. So I know there's a lot of people that want the Russians to swing. I say time is on their side. And just think about this. Here's the other part. What happens As I said, this guy wants to beat Garland up. What happens if I find out a way to get out of that bar without ever fighting? Nobody has gotten hurt. What if I figure out a way that I can run around behind the table? That guy comes after me. I go out the door and jump in my car and take off and I'm gone. Nobody had to get hurt. No fights, no cuts, no shots, no nothing. I got out there. So what happens if the Russians play this out in the long term? And at some point, the Brits and the Germans, et cetera, say, hey, man, let's try to find a way out of this. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't see a way out for the U.S. empire. The only way out is to lose. At some point, they got a problem. They've created an environment where the only thing they can do is win or lose. And right now, winning is not the option, and it never was, because they had a bad plan. They started off with a plan that said, we're going to start this war, and then we're going to sanction the Russians, and then their economy is going to crap out, and then we'll just take over Russia, and it'll be all ours. And when their economy didn't crap out, they didn't have a second plan. They didn't have a backup plan, and now they're just putting out fires. Oh no, what do we do next? And that's where the U.S. empire is. Oh no, what do we do next? That's where you want your opponent. Your opponent attacks you, and you strike him, whap, 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 and he backs up, and it's, oh no, what do I do next? Do I continue fighting? This guy has demonstrated that he can hurt me, and he's an experienced and skilled fighter. Do I back up and people are watching and become humiliated? Do I go in again and try to attack him a second time, knowing that I better be ready because I'm going to get hurt? And I don't know how bad, so that you put your opponent in a position where they got to back up and think. And the wisest move is to move. In this instance, and in some instance, you got where a person may feel like this: my boys are behind me, my girlfriend's behind me. I've started a fight with Garland, and I gotta win this. And then maybe they can't win it, but they can't back up and take the humiliation of getting laughed at by their boys. You got your ass kicked. You started a fight, got your ass kicked, you idiot. They don't want to face that. So instead they run into, well, I'll attack Garland again, right? Because hopefully I can somehow get in a lucky punch or do something and take him out. Garland's not all that tough. I'll get him. I think that we are in a spot right now where the Russians are exercising strategic patience, and the U.S. is looking for an options. They're looking for options. And then what is their option? Either continue the fight or get out. And they know that here's the thing about it. They know that their time is limited. There's been multiple rumors running around that have said the same thing. Hey, give Zelensky till December. If he's not done by December, then you got to start negotiating. Well, if I'm Russia, there ain't no way in the world I'm launching a big offensive before December, because now I know he's going to have to negotiate, and he's going to have to do it under pressure. So no, I'm going to punch the crap out of him now. I'm going to punch him between now and December. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to make a move to end it. I don't have to, because at that point I know their hands are folded. Strategic patience. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I don't have time to go over super chats and all of that. I'll try to do another one this evening and do the super chats, and I'll probably be on again this evening. Thanks a lot for those who can. You see everything there going across the bottom. If you can do a Patreon or buy me a coffee, you can do $5 or whatever you can afford. It'll say buy Garland a coffee, 5, 10, whatever, how many coffees you want. And of course, it's just like Patreon. If you choose now, you can do a subscription service just like Patreon, and you can say, I'm gonna give that $5 a month, just like Patreon does. So buy me a coffee is really great. Cash App, all of those things. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this. If you can, look, even if you can't afford it, who cares? If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. People are struggling right now. Just share this on all of your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. Peace.